This is Naked by the Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. Brought to you by Vladi and Nektarios Lolios. And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help us share it with the world.
Hi, Vladi. How are you?
Hi, Nektarios. Hi, friends. I am good, so I want to tell you. So I'm in Islamabad. It's Saturday today, specifically 2:21 p.m. So I have sort of half a day behind me. It's interesting day because it's sort of like relaxing, but also I've been doing things, but everything's sort of energizing. I'm now sitting in the apartment and I have this beautiful view, which looks like a poster sort of, because Islamabad is mountainous compared to Karachi, which is really this sort of emerging country, vibrant city, dust, everything you can imagine. Islamabad is sort of zen. It's much more on the north in the country. The climate is really pleasant, so it's about 20 degrees. And I'm just looking at this Faisal Mosque, which is beautiful scenery. What about yourself, Nektarios? But
I'm processing my morning coffee.
Spotlight on you, and
I try not to hate you for being able to look onto something nice because we're still in lockdown. I do have these visions of all the things I want to do once movement is normalized again in whichever format. I attended this online conference this week called Innovative Greeks.
Oh, really? You are on this trend now about bringing innovation and startups to Greece and
it was amazing because this is actually a government body and an endeavor. They organized a conference attended by about 10,000 people globally, which was bringing everybody from around the world, from the Greek diaspora together to discuss this momentum that Greece is having at the moment about entrepreneurship, innovation, funding. There's a couple of big successes, big exits, and it feels amazing. So from that perspective, I'm quite energized.
That's good.
But I also feel a little bit like, in school, in the break where the cool kids are in a corner and you're normally not allowed because you're not part of the cool gang. Mm-hmm. So the cool gang's in Greece at the moment. And I know I should be there. But because of everything with COVID, I can't be there. So it's a little bit of a, when can I travel? Mm-hmm. That's how I feel right now.
I need them in person and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you tell them about mental health and importance?
Yeah, of course. No, I wasn't speaking, so I was attending. But my ecosystem, my connections in Greece, they all know about the Future Farm. And actually, we can have a conversation about this at some point, how much culture comes into this, how much the national kind of flavor defines a little bit how okay it is to talk about the stuff that we talk about, right? Because we've been surprised. We thought in some markets when we spoke to somebody, spoken to entrepreneurs, we were surprised by the openness and the recognition.
Yeah.
Not sure how ready Greece is to talk about this, but it's also easy to generalize, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, this went down a different path, but I'm very energized about that.
Good. And on that note, I was recording a podcast in the morning today with a local, they're sort of a entrepreneurial network. So supporting, it's a woman founder who established the organization. It's a venture actually, and they are doing a little bit of a venture building and ecosystem sort of support. And they have this podcast, and they called me in, which I was really grateful for because still I'm trying to belong, which they make it quite easy for me here in Pakistan, which I'm again I appreciate it a lot, and I'm trying not to come across as sort of a global citizen, rather a white woman from Europe, that is trying to sort of teach them something. So I'm trying to be quite self-aware that I don't come across like this. But the reason why I'm saying it is that we were talking, that she was curious a lot about the subject of well-being and wellness for entrepreneurs, and we talk about the context here in Pakistan. And as I think you guys can also assume, it's still quite stigmatized. And what is interesting to see when I start talking about it with our founders, it resonates with them a lot again. So that's sort of similar to what we had in even in London, right? So on the individual level, it resonates. On a more structured level or structural level, it's non-existent nearly. So the incubators don't speak that language really. Investors so far away. And maybe that's a good bridge also to our conversation with Noa, which I enjoyed very much.
Yeah, Noa. We liked our conversation with Noa.
She was very cool, beyond other things. And, like this startup psychologist, right? I can imagine that it can, if our conversation helps to sort of disseminate this role across, the industry, that's pretty awesome, because there is a lot in there, whether you call yourself a startup psychologist or any other box. But I think that role has a place, whether it's a VC, incubator, venture builder, you name it. I think it's an important part of the support ecosystem. And for somebody to be accountable for it, I actually love it. And not like in a silo, obviously, but educating also the community that, whether it's the fund people. Even now I'm thinking that obviously I'm trying to educate my co-founders here in Pakistan in our venture builder, how to do this. And I'll tell you about it because it's not super easy. But yeah, I love the startup psychologist tagline.
So when we started the Future Farm, we obviously spoke to a lot of our investor friends to get a sense of what they think about this, right? And not just venture capital, but also other type of investors, angel investors, family offices. And it's really interesting because ultimately VCs or investors are just a reflection of the wider population. There's people within there that understand what we're talking about, people who have absolutely no idea or have never had to think about this. The thing that I found baffling was this initial feedback from some of the investors that it's actually expected from entrepreneur to have a higher mental health propensity, if that's the right word, as in you have to be somewhat flawed to even take the risk to start a business, right? And that was really something that I really struggled with, because it showed a complete lack of empathy and compassion, and also partly just kind of showing that this is also part of the problem, that people get into these situations unprepared to start a business, and therefore when they hit a rock, when they hit a problem, the people they work with do not make space to even listen, right? And meeting Noa, who says, no, we built that relationship from the beginning. We asked these questions from the beginning because we want both sides, the entrepreneur to be alerted, but also to give us an insight on how they tick, because we want to help them manage this better so the business succeeds. That was a complete shift of perspective. And that's what was so eye-opening for me. Yeah.
And it does make a lot of sense, right? I mean, when you are in that conversation, everything is like, tick, tick, tick. I think you're right about that. This is a wider shift, a mindset shift around how we look at this whole industry. And if I look at it, I like the fact that we talk about both lens, right? So there was the lens of an investor and their role and how they show up. And then because there's also a big education piece, at least that's how I sort of took it in, for entrepreneurs and founders, in terms of like, hey, it's important that you also work on this. Like I also don't take for granted the fact that the support is available, but I'm just sort of going to flow through it. And, as an entrepreneur, like there is a big deal of work I have to do. And maybe, it's sort of why the emotion, because I feel like I'm emotional now, but the reason why I might be it's that I really do remember those conversations with early stage it was first time entrepreneurs. That's more important than the early stage, where really it was such a pushback to me. It's like, hey, Vladi, seriously, don't be silly. Like, why now? Such a distraction. It's like completely not important for me at the moment. It's like, please don't do those founder anonymous sessions. And I was like, not gonna happen. But so I see again that there is a responsibility on both sides. That's all I'm saying.
Well, what you just described, though, is a little bit what Noa said, that how do you deal with somebody who's really in the middle of it? Where she also
an interesting point.
I thought that's one of the big takeaways for me was you can't push people, right? You can help them with other stuff. So we had that recording. This was one of the things that stayed with me. And yesterday afternoon, I spoke to an entrepreneur who is actually going through quite a lot at the moment. There's questions around survival because of fundraising, but also questions around physical health and mental health. And my attempts to nudge were met with a lot of pushback. And it was mainly, I need to make sure that my safety is guaranteed first, which is I need to make sure that I bring the money in, and I have absolutely no capacity to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I literally had to think about a conversation with Noa. So rather than going, okay, maybe you should go and talk to somebody, I went, okay, how can I help you with your fundraising? That was the thing that she suggested. And it was interesting that for me, I made that switch because my natural inclination would be, oh, come on. It's a safe environment. Open up. He just didn't want to, right? But I think that was really great to hear. But you're absolutely right. People are also not always ready, and it's what can you build around it to prepare them. The conversation opened up so many doors.
You called me out here, which I like, because actually and I do remember now that I thought the same. I was on the same lines that are reflecting when Noa said it, and I was reflecting whether I did push in a moment that the readiness was not there. So yeah, I'm gonna sort of think about this because that again it comes back to the responsibility also of us then, right, as the people who are there to hold the space, create the space, to not be maybe sometimes pushy because we feel that there is you should be doing this, or there's a lot in there.
It also reminded me a little bit of the conversation we had with Simon in the last season.
You have to remind people Simon, because there might be people who don't know him. It's true.
No, I was about to say.
Okay.
So Simon Kant is one of the two partners of Reinventure, which is a fund in Australia. We had Simon on our podcast a little bit representing the investor view, but also he's been through his own personal journey, and he was very, very happy to share about his experiences. But one of the big things we discussed was, where is the line where you as an investor, you go too far or you do too little? How do you best support your portfolio companies? So with Noa, a lot of it was also about the selection process at the beginning. How do you build the relationship? But Simon was like, okay, you've invested in a company, you have a portfolio of founders, and how do you best do it? Do you sort of become their counselor, their therapist, because you build a very close relationship? Or do you give them a budget? Do you kind of practically make it conditional? And it's nice to have somebody actually ask these questions, because I'm sure there's no one size fits all. So, but that awareness that you have a role and defining your role, that's the key thing. And if you look at most other VCs that we talk to, if we focus on VCs particularly, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
I'm looking at it in a lens of, let's say there is a company VC backed. So I'm a VC, I have invested into a company and they need help with go-to-market strategy or marketing campaign, right? So I'm not a marketing house, right? I'm not a growth hacking. I don't have growth hacking experts, etc. So I'm looking at it as my role is to help enable. So how do I do it? By different ways, from connecting them to the right experts, making sure that prioritizing this, right? I mean, creating that space. I'm sort of looking on the well-being piece and wellness, and we can sort of box it into many different terms and words, as nearly just in a similar way. Like, it's a need, right? That needs to be prioritized. My role is to create the space to enable. That's a little bit of the lens that I'm having on this.
The problem though is that
that
recognition just doesn't happen, right? So I mean, it's obvious that growth hacking is important for a business or go-to-market strategy or finding the right salesperson, whatever. But it's absolutely not obvious that supporting the entrepreneurs with other things that are wishy-washy or softer. People use that word, softer, right? That is just excluded. And that's the thing that I wonder, and you know, I mean, we can also talk about this sometimes when we've approached VCs and we talk to the people about this. One of the things we had was also, for the ones who are a little bit more open, was also them saying, you know what, we could do with some support ourselves. So when you knock on the door, when you try to open the door, you open ultimately multiple doors, right? Because the entrepreneurs are one bucket, but the investors are individuals who might have their own challenges and their own struggles, right?
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming though sometimes because of that, right? So you feel like, well, where does this whole thing start? Is like, so is it founders, is it investors? Is it actually those that invest into investors? So the LPs. And I think this is where we come back to that it is a systemic problem. There are a number of stakeholders and players that are part of the problem and solution. So, I think that is the first recognition of the systemic nature of it, at least from where I sit, and which is now Islamabad. and having the dialogue for those stakeholders together, but also in those individual sort of not silos, but in those groups of, yes, as investors, collectively, what can we do? As founders, what is my role and responsibility? It might be having a voice, asking for it, putting attention, doing something, right? So it all comes together, sort of. You know, the other thing, to bring it a little bit more into a concrete thing, one thing that stayed with me, and I touched base on it also today when I was recording here in Pakistan. So Noa, in her guidelines, which is the deep dive, and if you guys haven't yet looked into it, whether you are an investor, startup accelerator, incubator, or a founder, really useful reading, because Noa is sort of unpacked and decoded in that guideline. What are sort of some of the attributes that investors look out for when they are checking on the founder's ability of self-awareness, resilience, well-being? All of it is in there. It goes wider than the individual founder. It also touches base on the team dynamics and something that was very interesting for me, and I asked about it on the podcast, right, which was the team market fit. But the one thing that I connected to was on the founder personality and the sort of how she looks on founder personality. There were like 3 things, and one of those things was the motivation. And we had this interesting conversation around it, right? Which is around when she said, or you said it, I think, was like, I can't deal, or, it's too many of entrepreneurs who are doing this out of their MBA courses. And it's like, I figured a problem during my MBA course. And this is, please, if you're out there and you did this as a part of the outcome MBA course, this is not to disqualify it in any way, because we have different journeys. But there is something about asking ourselves that question at the beginning and on the journey, right? Before we embark on it. It's like, why am I really doing this? Why do I want to do this? Like, what motivates me? What drives me? And I think it's deep. But did you ask yourself that question, Nektarios, when you went into your journey?
I think, first of all, let me clarify. If somebody from an MBA course would say, I figured out a problem, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Usually they come with, I did an interesting project. And this is where the problem starts. So I'm being a bit cheeky here, but ultimately, what we talk about in the episode with Noah is the fact that people do this because it's an ideation exercise and it is a great idea or a fun idea. But there is a disconnect, because if you start a business because we think you have a nice idea, and you don't really understand what it means to start this business and take it to a success, with all the ups and downs, you're much more likely to struggle and you're much more likely to give up. And this is where the passion comes in that Noah was talking about, and ultimately the motivation that you're addressing. Because the people that we see who really believe in changing the world through what they're doing, and it doesn't have to be the entire world, it could be their immediate environment, it could be their country, it could be something much closer to home. They really come from a different place, which has both positives and negatives, which means that the emotional investment is high, and therefore when things go wrong, it also much more likely to shake it. And this is also where the identity piece comes in, right? The identity piece for me is very much linked to the passion that you have behind something. And therefore, when things go off, you question your own identity rather than detaching yourself from the business. Because if you do an interesting project and you start it and it fails, you go, fine, I tried something. It's like a project within an organization. And maybe it doesn't look good on your CV, but it's just a tick in the box. So your question was about motivation for myself. Was that what you were asking?
Ask yourself those questions, and I was just looking on the guideline, and the question that Noah poses here are: what drove you to go onto the entrepreneurial path? What is your end goal with this venture? How did you discover this particular problem you are tackling, right? Which are guiding questions to actually understand where the bond comes from, where the drive comes from. So did you ask yourselves those questions in some way or form?
In my journey? Absolutely.
I know about that, but even before.
But even before, we started boot camp, of course, I knew the right thing to do was to build an industry innovation driven accelerator, because it didn't exist. And it required to educate the industry on the one side, but also make the startups understand that this is a vehicle that they won't get anywhere else, because this would ultimately lead to fundamental industry-wide innovation. So for me, the changing the world piece was actually physically there, because there was a global perspective on this. And there was also, the only way to do this is for me to do this myself with the right partners, rather than try to do this within the corporate environment that I was part of. In the same way, when I left my old life, I also knew that the things I wanted to achieve were no longer possible within my old environment. So I had to step out of that and actually then, take a breather. But we started the Future Farm because we want to make an impact, right? We believe that there's a need. I started my digital bank builder with my other partner because we believe that nobody understands that digital banking, the way it works now, doesn't really satisfy the needs of the underserved. So therefore we need to do. So it always goes back to, there is a really ambitious goal there that is bigger than me and my co-founders. And the only way we can address it is by doing it ourselves with the right people who have the right spirit.
Yeah, I like this because there was just a moment of hesitation when I was reading through it. And, I have met number of really purpose-driven founders, right? That sort of saw the cause and connected to the cause as something beyond them, bigger than themselves. And we're really emotionally connected to it. But no, it did not mean that, let's say, it was their personal problem or, they lived through it in the past. So I think I also wanted to make that sort of clear, that I don't think it always has to be your individual pain point. Yes, if you are connected emotionally to it, I think that's also what can help very much to navigate the hardship, the periods of dip and the challenging times. but I think it was important for me when I went through it is also to sort of make clear that we are not saying that, only those who sort of were struggling on that specific problem in the past, let's say, and then they decide to build a business around it, that's the only way how you can be. Yeah.
We're not saying that. I think if you look at the people that we've spoken to, people started businesses for different reasons.
Yeah.
Right. People started businesses because out of necessity, because they were unemployable, because they had, like remember Asma, where it was a sort of a logical evolution because she was enjoying the cooking more than she was enjoying doing the constitutional law, if we were to simplify this. But there is always a passion behind it. For the entrepreneurs. I think the passion piece is the important piece. So when we talk about motivation, and it doesn't have to be super sexy, that's the other thing. For me, that's important as well. But we do see founders who start a business because it looks cool, or they think it's going to make people rich quickly, which in itself is, I think, also an acceptable motivation. The problem is that it's just very, very unrealistic.
Not sustainable in the long term. Yeah. There's one quote she has here, which is sort of supposed to be an evidence of a low sort of intrinsic motivation, the deep motivation, which goes like this. I have always envied other startup founders and wished to finally take this step myself. And which was interesting because I felt like, oh my God, I've heard this so many times. So basically what we are saying, guys, is that they're dig deeper and understand why you are embarking on this journey, right? What's in there for you personally, because you will need to tap into this when the hard days come. That's probably it. Yeah. Awesome. I think that's it for today.
Is it? Jesus, that went past really fast.
Yeah. See you guys in 2 weeks. I have no idea where I'll be. And Nektarios, maybe you'll be much more free.
I'll still be in London in 2 weeks. We're in mid-March, so not much will have relaxed by then. But hopefully the weather will be nicer.
Yeah. Have an awesome whatever day you are listening.
Bye, Vladi. Bye-bye. You've been listening to Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. To learn more about our work, sign up to our newsletter or visit thefuturefarm.co, where you can also apply to be a Naked guest. Naked is produced by Dan Turgel and edited by Catherine Dworkin. And remember, subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help share it with the world.